Welcome to the Good Leadership Podcast, where we engage with esteemed thought leaders and explore research-backed strategies and techniques that empower leaders at every level to achieve meaningful results that drive lasting change. So if you're following in, step 4 is that disruption call to adventure. Let's take it back to our two movies that we're kind of connecting those with. So in Star Wars, that call to adventure. Now Luke has gone off of Tatooine, is looking for adventure with Obi-Wan Kenobi. If you're in the framework of The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is now in Oz, and it just is going down the yellow brick road.
She had Glenda, the Good Witch of the North. She was there to help guide her on the way. That's the position the brand plays for them, right? And Luke, of course, had Han Solo. He really had Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda. Those were more or less his guides. The other ones were kind of his sidekicks.
There you go. Well, now step 5, we have the call to adventure. We're on the journey. We've identified our unique value proposition. Now we look at the antagonists, which are, you categorize them into 3 categories: the villains, fog, and the crevasses. So if you could just go into those for our listeners and explain what each one does and the obstacle it poses.
Yeah, I love this particular chapter because it so often gets ignored in business communications and leadership communications. So in chapter 4, where we had the inciting incident, we turned the world upside down on our audiences. Chapter 5 is where we really start amplifying that pain. This is like, okay, villains, fog, and crevasses. Villains, what are the external competitive forces that are getting in your way? It could be time, it could be money, it could be other competitors literally taking your business away. It could be, the recession or whatever. These are the physical external forces that you want to identify and leverage their energy to make your story that much more powerful because you're going to show your audience, your heroes how to overcome it. So, villains, external forces, and don't forget about the internal forces, the fear, the confusion, the trouble that's going on between the ears of your audiences because you're going to want to speak to that too. That's villains. Fog. These are the blind spots. What don't they know that they don't know about themselves, and or what don't they know that they don't know about your offering that it is your job to go in and clear up for them? And when you start speaking truths and revealing things to them, they're like, wow, I can trust you. I mean, that's what you're doing here is building trust by doing a jujitsu move on that negative energy that confronts you from these villains, the fog, and the third one, crevasses. What are the operational gaps? What are the mindset gaps that you have to overcome that we can help you bridge as being your mentor or guide? So I love this because this is where you bring a lot of juice and energy to your storytelling because you are embracing those obstacles and antagonists in your life, in your customer's life, and you're going to show them how you can help them overcome them.
And some people feel like that's counterproductive. You don't want to mention the obstacles. You just want to give them solutions. But in reality, it's better to showcase these obstacles and let them know of, what they're experiencing and problems that you then solve for.
Well, Christopher Lockett in that fabulous book, Play Bigger, he says, and after I showed him the ABT, he found it brilliant from a brand point of view. He says, nobody buys a solution unless they have an effing problem. He likes using the F bomb for emphasis, but that's the truth. So if you are not revealing that problem and then amplifying the pain on the problem, your solution is way less attractive to your audience. Let's go back to Andre Martin Hobbs at Prate Auto Partes. People would come in and they would say, gee, I got through this. I don't really have much money. I think I have enough for a down payment. I just want to have the freedom and dignity of getting a car again in my life. And they go, okay, wait, time out. Great. Totally understand that. But maybe the bigger problem here is you're not terrific with your finances, especially now when every penny counts. So let's embrace that. And knowledge can win over every problem, help you overcome almost every obstacle. So let's take 3 hours and take you through this financial planning course where you show us what you got, where your money's coming, what your expenses are, and we together will determine what is a prudent automobile for you to buy. Now, how is that different than most shark used car salesmen? Great, Charles. I'm going to put you in this rig right here. I'm going to hope to get 3 months worth of payments out of you. And when you stop paying in month 4 and 5, I'll just simply go and repo the thing. I'll have those payments. I'll have your down payment, and I'm going to go and sell it to someone else. Well, you're not helping anybody in that. You're helping yourself, and that's it. So if Andre did not embrace the real heart of the problem of your finances right now, because you don't have much, so you got to be especially good at it, then the rest of it would have blown up in his face.
You're right. So, and it's so important to identify any great story has a villain. So, Darth Vader in Star Wars, the Wicked Witch of the East, I believe, and the Wizard of Oz. Without a great villain, without those antagonists, the story's not memorable. So then once you've identified those, then it's time to really look at the mentor, which is you, to humanize your brand with its promise, its gift, and its personality.
You're so right. Real quick about that villain thing, and I couldn't help but think of Dr. Randy Olson on this, and he had a famous screenwriting coach at USC. His name was Frank Daniel, and Frank Daniel said, "Your story is only as good as your villain is bad." So, yes, that's where you wanna ratchet up the pain because then that opens the door for your entry into the story. That's chapter 6, step 6 of Mentor or Guide. Now, notice that really, ever since we departed after the backstory of step 1, where you were trying to determine your number 1 position in the marketplace, what you do differently and more distinctively than your competition, pretty much everything else has been about your audience all the way up to this point. And now it's the time to merge the two because you are going to introduce yourself as the Glenda Good Witch of the North, as Yoda, as whatever metaphor you would like of that sidekick, that mentor helping someone along. This is you as the brand, as the confidant. And you want to show up here by understanding your character. So I really like to use the Jungian 12 archetypes that has you go in and kind of assess what do you sound like? What is your tone? What is your feel? And so forth. Get that done because that's going to influence how you communicate on your website and everywhere else. But you're also going to want to explore what is the emotional promise that people will get from working with you. Emotionally, you're going back to that wish fulfilling thing. And then what is that intrinsic gift? Because people don't buy what you make, they buy what you make happen in their life. So this is in chapter 6, halfway through the story cycle system, where you really do some introspection and ask yourself those hard questions. Who am I? How do I show up day in and day out in my authentic way? And how am I there to help my audience get what they want on their hero's journey?
And this was a step that took us a while to really build out and develop. When we were going through it with you and looking at those 9 one-word descriptors, I like how you break them down into different categories. One's on the organizational level. We're a learning development and leadership development company. So the organization, we're a curator of learning. We're passionate about what we do, about developing leaders, making a difference in their lives, and we're a trustworthy source of that information. That was a little bit easier getting to the offerings, getting to that emotional connection of what do we want these offerings to really impart emotionally to our audience. We want them to be relevant, engaging, and impactful so that people feel like it was worth their time. They were getting something that was of value and they're able to use it to improve the outcomes of their lives. And then when you separated that, which I thought was pretty unique. I mean, having now separate outcomes. Now, what are the outcomes you want for the individuals? We identified as, confident, energized, and elevated. And it really took a while to come to these because we wanted to make sure that really captured the emotional essence of what these outcomes with IMS really wanted to impart for us. And then you talk about the emotional promise of your brand. Once again, when I talk to leaders, it's hard to get to that emotional level. They usually are a lot of features and benefits. We came up with the emotional promise of the brand was being empowered. We want people being empowered for coming to an IMS session, and there was many aspects of that. And then the gift was transformation. We wanted them to be transformed in some way to be better leaders. But This really was a critical step for us. Took a lot of time to unpack it and really identify the right emotional promises, gifts that we wanted to convey through our brand.
Yeah, and that's okay. I mean, that's kind of the way the process works, is it's as much psychological as anything to really get into it and to dig it up. And the answers are all there. They really are. It's not like you have to fabricate anything because you are simply unearthing them in this process when you go through it. And then when you talk about IMS or any brand talks about itself, they're able to come at it from a truly authentic point of view. That exercise, the 9 one-word descriptors of which you did a great job of describing, I call it the OO exercise, O-O-O, and your audience can do this right after this if they want, is go out and find 3 one-word descriptors that define your organization. Find another 3 one-word descriptors that define your offering, and then find the last 3 one-word descriptors that characterize the outcomes or what your audience, what your customers get from the process. What do you do with these? Well, you then go and use each one of those one-word descriptors as a singular theme for an anecdotal story that you can share about a customer, a colleague, anyone who has been positively impacted by your brand. And that helps become your guide around when you really start building a storytelling culture around your brand narrative, your the stories of your offering.
And that's step 7, the journey. These anecdotal stories come from those 9-word descriptors. And then you have a good structure or framework for these anecdotal stories to make sure that they really capture a compelling narrative. If you could go through those briefly with our audience, just so they can kind of identify what pieces need to be in these stories.
Yeah. So it's an expanded and but therefore an ABT, and I call them the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact. They are, and think about your stories as moments, a moment in time when we could really define the impact we had on someone, that aha moment. So it starts with, when did this happen? You want to be as specific as you possibly can. Was it earlier today at 9 a.m.? Was it last Tuesday? Was it the summer of 2023? You want to be as specific as you can because that triggers the limbic brain to say, oh, I'm about ready to hear a story that's temporal, that is time sensitive. I better pay attention to it to know what I would do in case it ever happens to me. Something must happen over time. Then you have a location stamp. Where did it happen? You want to quickly describe the location. It could be inside, maybe it was this fall in a cold, dark conference room at my office in Cincinnati. And all you're doing there is firing up the theater of the mind. Now that you got the limbic brain's attention, you want to fire up the theater of the mind so it can start picturing what happened. You become vastly more memorable and it starts living vicariously through the telling of the story. Then you introduce one character, not 2 people, not a team, not a division, not a brand, not an organization, one person that experienced all of this. Essentially, that's your and statement of agreement or act 1. Where, when did it happen? Where did it happen? To who did it happen? And what was it that they want that this happening had an impact on? Then you get into the action. This is the longest part of the story. This is the act 2 or the but. They wanted this, but then this came down, and you quickly tell that story that has this surprise outcome. They didn't realize they were going to learn this. They didn't know it could be that powerful. Whatever that is, that leads you to the final of the 5th element, and that is that aha moment that makes your business point for you. So what you've just done by sharing this anecdote is to be able to make your business point without the assertions and the opinions that your audience is going to push back on. You're just simply telling a real world story, true story, well told, that then go, aha, I get it. I see. That's the experience my fellow Homo sapien storytelling monkey went through. I want some of that. And that's how you can use the ABT in this longer form of the 5 primal elements of a short story. When, where, to who, what happened, what was the aha moment that underscores the business point.
And I found that to be a challenge for our company because we weren't a storytelling culture to get them used to collecting these stories and putting it in that narrative framework. Is that common with other companies that have to get used to collecting and have a repository and build this storytelling culture?
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah, Charles, you think about it. When we get into a business or an organizational situation, we tend to lead with logic and reason when what our audiences really want is the emotional pull of a story. So we think in bullet points, features, functions with a little benefits dropped in. But when you go home and you're sitting across from a loved one, a friend, family member, whatever, maybe you're having that glass of wine or drink or whatever, you immediately launch into stories. What happened? How did it happen? What went down? What do you think of the outcome of that? So, all I ask people to do is don't worry so much about telling a story. Share a moment that you had a positive impact on someone and what was the outcome of that moment using those five key elements of that story, and you will automatically be telling a story. But it's funny because I've worked with a lot of sales teams, and quite often I'll get very type A salespeople say, Park, this makes me nervous because I'm not a great storyteller. Nobody wants to hear my stories. And that's when we reframed it. Don't think of it as story. Think about it as sharing a moment in time that something happened of great impact that makes your business point for you.
That's a great way of rephrasing it because those are common questions that I get asked as well. I'm not a good storyteller, or I don't have any good stories to share. And I think that as long as you become more aware to look for these stories, they're all around you. And you get better at this practice as you go through it. And you have this framework, which really helps in developing this skill.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. By virtue of being a Homo sapien, you are a storyteller, and your brain wants to take in knowledge via stories. So give yourself a break. You don't have to be Orson Welles here. You don't have to be Spielberg. You don't have to be George Lucas. You could be Charles and Park. We taught ourselves how to do this stuff, and it's hugely impactful. If we can do it, anybody can do it.
There you go. The next step is the victory. Celebrate wins on the customer journey of brand awareness to adoption through appreciation.
Yeah. So what we didn't really cover in that seventh step is that journey. We talked about the stories because you want to tell different stories depending on where your audience is in the hero's journey. Now, a lot of people, when they're talking about customer journey and customer journey map, they might have six, seven, eight, or nine different levels of that journey. And that's all cool. That's great. To me, it's too much intel. I wanna know about 3, like, 3-act structure of story. I wanna know when are the 3 most important parts of an audience's journey. That would be number 1, brand awareness. When I first hear about you, when I first hear about IMS, never knew you existed, but somebody took one of your courses, they loved it, they had all this confidence, they could speak to their leadership, and they told me about it, here I am. So, they in this brand awareness phase already maybe telling them stories about you or your industry, your competition. So you want to meet them where they are with the proper story coming out of your story library. Then it goes on to brand adoption. Well, this sounds cool. Can I sit in on a webinar? Sure. We got a free one coming on next week with Park Howell and storytelling. Why don't you come in and get a taste for the kinds of trainers we bring in and whatever? That's called brand adoption, even if they haven't bought anything. They are now investing time and resources and their thought, into what you have to offer. Then comes brand appreciation. I love this. Here's my investment. In fact, I'm going to bring 2 more colleagues along with me on this. This is great. And oh, by the way, I'm going to start sharing my story of the impact IMS gave me with my world, which then leads to the most powerful form of advertising there is, free word of mouth marketing. So, brand awareness, brand adoption, and brand appreciation. Then we move into step 8 of victory. What people, when I ask them, what does success look like to you? So if it's a salesperson, well, success is to get that big customer to sign that contract, sign that purchase order. Great. Got it. Awesome. That could be 7 steps, 7 stories down the road as you get, brought up through the food chain. What do you want? What small little step do you want your audience to take right now that then you can point to as being that's a victory step. That's a success step. We are progressing together in your story. So I always like to have people go in this, well, victory is what are the little victories that you serve up in the brand appreciation phase? In your case, it might have been, hey, come on over for a free webinar and then have some experience at that. From brand adoption, okay, I've done the webinar, I love it. There's a little success there. Now I'm going to pay for my first round. All right, how can you dial in success metrics along that and make sure that your audience is aware of them, that they see them, that you've designed them into the process, but then you're there to celebrate them with them. And then right up to really the success metrics of brand appreciation is they keep coming back for more because they're getting tremendous value for their investment, and you are equipping them with stories that they can share with their world to show the world how more confident they are, how smart they are in that investment, and of course, which begins this virtuous cycle right back to brand awareness. They're sharing it with their world. Someone out there has never heard of IMS before. Wow, brand awareness from my friend who I trust. Maybe I ought to look into this. And it happens. The important thing to point out at this, let me just show this right. It's I'm not a shameless plugging here, although I am. But in the hero's journey, it's a one and done loop. The protagonist wakes up in their ordinary world, they get a call to adventure, they go to this extraordinary world, and they return back to their ordinary world with the boon, which I think is totally cool. You see it everywhere. But in this case, the story cycle system, you can see it's an expanding, virtuous cycle, if you will. And the reason why that is every time your audience experiences a new story in a new way with you as they become more of a participant in your story, that customer engagement grows, that brand bonding grows. And so to me, the outcome of all this stuff is to create this spiral of engagement that gets bigger and bigger and bigger with every revolution of the story you told. So your audience goes from hearing it for the first time to being actively proclaiming their story with you to their world. That makes sense?
Makes perfect sense. I love that virtuous, ever expanding cycle of engagement. I think every company would like to have that as well. And that takes a while. It took IMS quite a while to go into that journey process, collect those stories, look at success points and metrics along the way, and celebrate. So that's once again not a step to be rushed, and spend the necessary time to develop those stories. And most importantly for us, and I think a lot of organizations have this issue as well, is that they look at it broadly, where for us, we had to focus on one individual. Let's look at the impact for one individual in these experiences, right? It makes it so much more impactful, those narratives, when you focus on one person or at least one group instead of just having a broad based story that covers the gamut of your customer base.
Absolutely. Yep, you always wanna pull it from one individual, one audience, build on that, and then once you go through this, go back and then repeat the cycle with that audience number 2, audience number 3. You're gonna see that you can use many, 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 if not all of the same story points. You just might have a little bit different slant on it depending on who that audience is and what it is they want from you.
You got it. Now, if you've done your homework and done all the work up to this point, then step 9 should be a little bit easier for you. And that's the moral, where you're trying to articulate your purpose to elevate the meaning of your brand. So it's critical that you've done the work prior to, so that it makes this step a little bit easier. Otherwise, it could be daunting.
Yeah. Well, you've heard time and again how so many buyers out there now are buying purpose driven brands. They don't want to just buy stuff from you. They want to know if they're spending money with you, that you're actually having a positive impact in the world, on the world, in the social impact, and so forth. So, everything you've done up to this point has really given you a tremendous understanding of your audience, the journey they're on, and how you are there to help them get what they want. So I like to always capture that in this little brand purpose statement. What do you do that goes beyond just making money? What's the kind of power? So, for instance, in the business of story world, it's about helping people live into and prosper from their most potent stories. Now, I can point to a 13-year-old Girl Scout in Seattle whose dad, who is a national sales manager for Master Electronics out of Phoenix, taught her how to use the ABT, and then she used it as a quick little video clip on her digital Girl Scout cookie website. Her goal was to sell 400 boxes in 2 months. She sold 400 boxes in 3 weeks. And she and he said, I think it was because of my ABT. So, up to the Walmarts Canadas of the world who I work with, or the Home Depot, the US Air Force, and everybody in between. My purpose, the reason why I'm here with the Business of Story, is to help people live into and prosper from their most potent stories. What's IMS's purpose? You've been through the process.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of broke it down into the why. Why do we exist? I mean, the why is measuring success beyond profit, right? It's success for leadership development companies should not solely be measured in terms of the revenue and the profit, but also by the positive changes their graduates bring into their organizations, their communities, and the world. And we exist to inspire and empower individuals to become leaders who transcend their roles and make a meaningful impact on the world because we want our purpose to extend beyond just our offerings. It's about cultivating leaders who are agents of positive change in society.
Yeah, that's beautiful. There's a whole brilliant business model around doing that, but it's a bigger thing. It's not just about making money. It's about really transforming leaders so that they can have that impact in the world. So I ask anybody watching this or listening to this, as you've gone through this in your mind, can you answer that question? And when you do, how would you articulate what do you do to impact lives beyond just making money? You think about Red Auto Park, yes, what they do. They help people get back in financial freedom, and the freedom of owning their own car and the freedom of having their own finance. By the way, you know what their gift is? It just is now occurring to me because I got a lot of these in the back of my mind. Their gift is to transport you. So kind of like what you're talking about. Let's transport you out of this tough world you're in right now into something better through the proper financing and payment of transportation. So there's a nice little depth to that story around transport that they can tell.
Great. And then now getting to the final step, I want to get to that before we end today, and that's step 10, the ritual. So it's now your goal is to make your brand a significant part of your customer's life. How do you build repeat business by becoming a ritual for them?
Yeah, and it kind of plays back to that, journey step of brand awareness, brand adoption. Now we're at brand appreciation. So you wanna be very cognizant and design in how you are going to share the sequel to your stories. I mean, how many Star Wars have there been? How many Rockies have there been? By the way, a great documentary, A Sly, about Sylvester Stallone. Check that out. You'll see sequel after sequel. Well, in the business world and with your story, you want to create sequels. It's that expanding spiral, right? So, how are you purposely arming your customers, your audiences, your peeps with your story from their point of view that they can go out and share with the world because you want to build repeat business? Most valuable business there is. It's business you don't have to go get that is coming in, but you're serving them well. And of course, then fanning that flame of word of mouth marketing. So, how do you build rituals in the use of your brand, product, or service? And how do you equip your customers to share your story with their world? That's really what the final ritual is, building that sequel, and it begins all over again.
Or you're speaking my language because I have one of my favorite movies is Rocky, and I you can see behind me as a one of the statues that you find in Philadelphia. So yeah, great story. And with trying to humanize the brand, what we say at IMS is we don't want customers, we want fans, but really we want evangelists. We want to make our story their story and build repeat business from them. And it goes to where we're always the guide and the mentor. We are not the hero of the story. How can we better serve them, understand their problem better than other people? We may not have the best solution, but if we understand their problem better than the competition, we're likely in most cases to get their business because they understand that we get their need, we understand their problem, and we're trying to contextualize and customize a solution to meet their needs. So critical. Such great information in this podcast. Thanks for walking us through the Story Cycle System Park. I like to end each episode with a kind of a call to action. And for today, I'd love for you to kind of give our leaders listening what's one thing they could do to become better storytellers, and then maybe something for their organization to really start using this framework.
Yeah, well, the first thing, as you know, I just finished reading every chapter of Brand Bewitchery on my podcast, The Business of Story. So think of it as an audiobook delivered through a podcast series, and there's no charge to you. So people could start listening to that on episode 423 at The Business of Story, and they can digest the entire book on their own time. And what I highly recommend is listen to one episode, one chapter at a time, then go and do the work on that, the exercises that I share with you. And you can start implementing this in, I don't know, next 3 or 4 weeks, actually. So that would be the best place. That's the number one thing. And you could use it for yourself. You can also use it for your organization. And of course, if you want to learn first the and, but, therefore, it's where everything begins. Well, I've got a course over at businessofstory.com/ABT. And it's just a 1 hour training. You've been through it. I know a lot of your folks have been through it. That's the beginning. That's what you build all of your story and your narrative intuition on.
Is that the best place for our listeners to reach out to you, or is there additional contact information you want to share?
Contact, yeah, on the businessofstory.com or, through LinkedIn. Park Howell. I'm the only one there, I think, with that name, so you can find me pretty easily. That's a real terrific way to reach out. Just IM me if you're interested in learning more or would like some more resources I could send to you. Yeah, bounce over to LinkedIn and shoot me a note.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining me today, Park. Really appreciate it, and great information we shared with our listeners.
Thank you, Charles. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be with you.
I hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights. If it has, I ask you to share it with someone who would also benefit from it. If you've been enjoying and gaining knowledge from this podcast, then subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find all the previous episodes of the podcast and additional learning resources. You can also subscribe to the podcast on Apple or Spotify and leave up to a 5-star review.